Hi, and a very good morning for those who are watching me at this moment on StreamYard, Facebook, and YouTube. Please bear with me a moment. I'm going to get our followers on our Instagram account to join us as well. So bear with me a moment. And a very good morning to our followers on Instagram. So we are live on Saturday, the 18th of April. I've said good morning, but I do know my lovely advocates in New Zealand and Australia going over then to the afternoon to the Emirates, over to Europe, UK and Ireland, and also an early good morning to those in the East Coast and the West Coast of Canada and USA. So I know our advocates knew this is going to be a webinar that their friends, their family, and their network should be watching. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Simone, and I'm the head of the Advocate Network Department. And welcome to Why Every Mortgage is Avoidability and the Pathway to Financial Freedom webinar. So lots of information will be shared today. So make sure you've got a pen and paper handy. I'd like to say thank you to those who registered, who submitted their questions. You may find that your question will be answered throughout the presentation. However, if you do happen to have any additional questions, then fear not, because this coming Tuesday, there will be an additional update, and those questions will be answered. So I will be sending a link out to you, to all the attendees today. So any additional questions, fill them out, make sure you get them over to me as soon as possible. And our speaker, and Andy Benson, who's head of the Ross Media, then we'll go through any of those additional questions with you. There are some additional links that we will be sharing as well, but don't worry, I will make sure that all attendees today will have access to those links. There's some really important links as well. Don't want to take too much information away, because I know it's going to be mentioned throughout the presentation as well. So I know mortgages are a huge burden for a lot of people, but our speaker is going to show you a complete pathway on how to remove that burden. So are you ready to rock and roll? Well, let me introduce you to our speaker. He is the founder and the president of the Republic of Old Souls. It's Ian Clifford. Ian, good morning to you. How are you today?
Well, good day. I know that we've got people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, UK, Europe. So the message is spreading. Good day to you. Good morning to you, depending on where you are. I think we're also going to be publishing this and distributing it at 10 a.m. in the 10 a.m. in the US, 10 a.m. in the Canada and Australia and New Zealand, etc. Because it's a hell of a time for some of our members to wake up in the middle of their night to come 10 a.m. UK time. So we are publishing this so that it's available for everyone. It's live, so you can go onto our social media channels and replay it, or you'll be invited. We're actually inviting people to remind them that it's there at 10 a.m. UK, 10 a.m. their time in whichever country they are living in. So hopefully the word will spread even more. Mortgages. I think mortgages are probably the biggest example of the modern slavery mechanism that we've been snared by. A very, very large percentage of the world population has a mortgage or has had one, and lots of people have tried to void mortgages, remove them from the charges register, get out of debt, and pretty much I would say that the only ones who've succeeded so far are the ones that you don't know about. and they're the ones that settled privately with the banks. And it's very interesting because I've been pursuing this remedy for quite a few years, and we have tried various ways to void mortgages in the past, and learned a lot from our attempts, all with great intention to give relief to our membership to void their mortgage. And every one of them has come across a burden or a challenge that was very, very difficult to overcome. So in the end, we retreated until I'd figured out how to crack the nut, how to achieve what would appear to most people to be the impossible. Because when you look at the problem, it's very, very difficult to solve the problem. Lots of people have tried. Most, if not all, that I've ever looked at have failed. Lots of people have had really good go at voiding their mortgage, and have tried for several years to do it, with multiple court hearings and all sorts of attempts, and a lot of energy, a lot of endeavour, a lot of determination, and still failed, because the mortgage market is very, very smart. The way it's been constructed, it's very smart at how it snares the so-called borrower. If you think of it like a trap, and these pincers clamp around your legs, how do you get out of that trap? And that's the trap of the mortgage. It's quite difficult to get out of it. But as I've said on nearly every webinar we've done in recent years, there is always a solution. And I believe that. I don't think there's any problem that exists that doesn't have a solution. And sometimes the bigger the problem, the bigger the solution needs to be to solve it. And often with problems, you don't solve them the first time that you try. I think if we were, just imagine that you could sit down with old Edison there, who allegedly invented the light bulb. I mean, there are some people who believe he didn't, but if you believe the popular belief is that Edison invented the light bulb. I think he tried many hundreds of designs before he got it right. So if you imagine that you're trying to void your mortgage and you've tried many, many ways of doing it, and every one of them has failed so far, it doesn't mean that there's not a solution out there. It just means that you're one step closer to that solution. You've learned something that doesn't work, so therefore you've got to take that learning into your next attempt. And that's what inventors tend to do, is they learn from their failures and they keep going until they find something that works. So you won't be surprised to hear me say that what I'm going to show you today works. And I'm going to show you why it works. And I'm also going to show you how it works. And it isn't a theory. And if there are people on here that are watching from the other side of the equation, like mortgage providers, investment bankers, or people that run the court system, you've met your match now. You've definitely met your match. And I'm going to show you why they should all be quite worried, because of what I've engineered here. I had a coffee with some people recently, and they asked me, "What do you do?" That's that favorite question you get when you meet new people. Yeah, what do you do? And I've got various answers that I give people, and nearly every time I give someone an answer, they don't understand it. I can tell by their expression on their face they don't get it. So I told them I was an engineer. And they said, "Oh, really? What kind of engineering are you into?" And I said, "I'm into financial engineering." "Oh, really? What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it's just like any engineering, really. You try and build things to solve problems, and that's what I do." And then the conversation moved on to something else. So I wonder whether that is how I should describe myself as a financial engineer. I don't know. They seem to. I didn't get a glazed look on the face, so maybe they understood what I was talking about. What we're talking about here is financial engineering. It is many component parts being brought together to solve a problem. Just like anything that you build, if you're an engineer, presumably you're doing it because you're trying to create a solution of some sort, and that's exactly what this is. It's a solution to a complex problem that is financial engineering. Next slide, please. The crisis that is going to get a lot worse. I think most people on this webinar will already know that energy prices are going through the roof. Inflation's rising all the time. People's income, their revenues from whatever it is they're doing, for many people are not going up in line with the cost of living. And the mortgage is arguably the biggest expense that a lot of people have got. So it's a big problem if all the other costs are going up and maybe even the mortgage cost is going up, and you're struggling to make ends meet. Probably you're going to pay the mortgage over other things, because you know that if you don't pay it, you're going to end up potentially in foreclosure, and that's that's a journey that most people don't want to go down. So there's the crisis, which is engineered. It's an engineered crisis. It's not none of these things are random, of course. Is going to put a lot more people under stress as we go forward. So voiding the mortgage, I think, should be a subject that a lot of people should really pay attention to, because if you can void the mortgage and then you can greatly enhance your journey around the monopoly board, as I call it, because you are recouping your signature credit, your abandoned signature credit. Then if you can do those two things, void the mortgage and start recouping your signature credit, and do them in parallel, that transforms the it pretty much eliminates the problem of the cost of living crisis, which is why I think this webinar will be very, very popular. And I think lots of people will play this for a long time to come. Next slide. So if you haven't been on one of my webinars before, I use the analogy of the Monopoly board, because the game of Monopoly was actually introduced over 100 years ago. It's a bit of a piss take, really, because they launched the game of Monopoly, and people were buying it thinking it was just a game that they could play, after dinner or whenever they played it. But it is, in fact, showing you exactly what is going on with commerce. It is so accurate to what is really going on. It's uncanny. I did some research into it as to why it was introduced, and all the information I could look at, or I found, was that they were trying to explain, like they do in the movies, exactly what's going on, but people think it's a game or they think it's fiction, when in fact it is explaining exactly what we are all doing, whether we realize it or not, which is playing Monopoly, which is why we call our Telegram channel Winning at Monopoly. So let me explain what it is for those who are new to my webinars. I think you can all agree, if you're on this webinar, unless you are an AI, that you're alive, yeah? You are real and you're alive. You've got some substance, you've got some blood coursing around your veins, hopefully. So you're a living being. You're a living being, a man or a woman. And when your mum and dad brought you into the world, they registered a birth certificate into the system. So they got this certificate issued, which has got a name on it, the very last name on the certificate, often referred to as the family name or the surname, which is quite often how it's described. And that certificate with the name, the surname, is the registration of a decedent estate. It's actually dead on arrival because it is an artificial construct. It's like a company. If you form a company, it's not alive, is it? You can't talk to it. You can't take it to dinner. You can't give it a call on the telephone and say, I'd like to have a chat with you. I'm not very happy with you. Because it's an artificial construct, just like the birth certificate entity is an artificial construct. So now if you can visualize the game of Monopoly, hopefully you've played it or you know what it is. Let's imagine you were sitting at the Monopoly table with some other people who are all going to play Monopoly with you. You put on the Monopoly board a piece, and that piece is the piece that's going to go round the board. And if you're really good at Monopoly, you collect notes or money. Let's just call it money for the moment. And if you're not very good, you probably lose all your money on the Monopoly board. So that's pretty much like life, yeah. So what you're actually doing in reality is that the state has coerced your mum and dad to register a birth certificate construct. They've got really the ownership of it, the legal title of it. They have ultimate control of it. It's their player piece that gets put on the Monopoly board. And when you get to the age of majority, whatever that age is, depending on where you are, 18, 21 is two common ages that people become an adult, what they describe as an adult. So all the time that you're not using the player piece because your mum and dad are looking after you, everything's pretty cool and dandy. But as soon as you get to the age of majority, you start to use this player piece, this artificial birth certificate construct, on the Monopoly board of commerce, probably without realizing that it's an artificial construct. You might get a bank card, you might get a driving license, you might get a passport, and you might get some other documents which have got this name on them. And you might believe that that name is actually you. But of course it isn't. And you can verify that by looking at the birth certificate itself. It says on the bottom of most of them, don't use this as a form of identity. So that's a bit of a giveaway. If you look at the date it's registered, in most cases, it is a completely different day from the day that you were born. And it's got a reference number. Somewhere on that certificate, there's a reference number. And that reference number is like an incorporation number. So what you're looking at here, it's like you've got a company or a trust that is sitting on this artificial Monopoly board. And the only way it can move around the board is if you transfer your energy through the artificial construct, the birth certificate construct, often referred to as the citizen or the person. If you look up these words in the dictionary, what is the etymology and the actual meaning of citizen or person, it's going to basically, if you look hard enough, it's going to tell you it's an artificial construct. It's not a living man or a woman. And what they've done, and I'm trying to get this message out because so many people out there are completely confused by, basically they believe that once they realize that the birth certificate construct is not them, the next thing that they typically do is try and separate themselves from it. They go around saying that birth certificate is not me. and I'm not responsible for anything that it gets into, any difficulties or liabilities. And lots of people believe that you can sever the tie between the living man, woman, and the birth certificate construct just by saying it's not me, or just by saying, no, I'm a living man or woman and I only answer to God. I don't answer to Caesar, which is it's a terminology for the state, for the cabal that runs the Monopoly board. And people aren't realizing that they have been trapped from the moment the birth certificate was registered. You see, the living man, woman becomes the agent for the birth certificate construct. And if you don't know what an agent is, it's not an estate agent or any other kind of agent that you could, a football agent or a pop star's agent. No, an agent in the law has a responsibility equal to the principal. So what I'm talking about here is if the birth certificate construct is fined or is facing jail sentence or owes mortgage installments or owes taxes, because all of those things are happening on the Monopoly board, the agent, the living man or woman, is liable, equally liable for all of those things. And that's the trap. The state, those that run the Monopoly board are next level genius at trapping everyone to believe that A, they are the birth certificate construct, and B, if they realize that they're not, they think they can easily sever the tie just by saying that that's not me. That document, that construct is not me, therefore I'm not liable. And what they're not realizing is that the agency is the trap. So you've got to deal with the agency. But the agency it's a blessing and a curse all wrapped up in the same package. It's a curse because it makes the living man, woman completely liable for all of the liabilities of the birth certificate construct. But it's also a blessing because the agent, you see, is the source of energy, and the source of energy that flows onto the Monopoly board through the birth certificate construct. Guys, if you just give me 5 seconds, it's absolutely pelting with rain and my door's open, and I'm just going to close my door.
No worries, Ian.
Yeah, sorry about that. It was blue sky when I started, and I had my door open, and then suddenly the rain was coming down like a monsoon. So my floor would have got very wet if I'd left the door open. So
no worries.
So that's the problem. It's agency. It's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. It's also, they've given us a gift. So it's a trap and a gift all in the same package. And you'll realize why it's a gift as we go through this webinar, because it's all about energy. Everything that is going on the Monopoly board is going on because of the transference of human energy onto the Monopoly board through the artificial construct, this citizen person, this birth certificate construct. So that's kind of the landscape. Now, just 2 more things about the Monopoly board, which a lot of people aren't aware of. They're 2 very substantial facts. There are two types of title to property. You have legal title, and then you have equitable title. Now, if you are the keeper of a motor vehicle, certainly if you're in the UK, I can talk about DVLA is the place that you register the motor vehicle. And if you look at the certificate, it will tell you that that is the birth certificate construct, by the way, is the registered keeper. So you're not actually the owner, because the living man woman isn't the birth certificate construct, and the birth certificate construct is the registered keeper. Now that should tell you a lot about what's going on the Monopoly board. The motor vehicle, however expensive it may be, is actually registered to the state, and it's their motor vehicle. And they give you what's called a quittable title to use it, which is the registered keeper. If you look at property, and I've had, there was once when I used to rub shoulders with extremely wealthy, or they appeared to be extremely wealthy people. And they would always boast about how many things they had, right? Oh, I've got 5 houses, I've got 10, I've got 20. I've got a mansion with however many acres, or whatever their boast was. And the reality is that they don't actually have anything, because on this monopoly board of commerce, every legal title has been taken by those who run the monopoly board. So that means that nobody owns a property, nobody owns their business, nobody owns their investments. What they have is a quittable title. And a quittable title enables you to use the thing, the house, the car, the business, whatever it might be. When people are going around believing that they are very wealthy, they actually have zero, because the legal title has been taken by those who control the monopoly board, not just in one country, in every country I've ever researched, and that's quite a few. So the monopoly board is an illusion. It's a trap. It's a game. It's played with living men and women moving a player piece around the board, which is the birth certificate construct. And I think, and I hope you agree, that if you're going to play the game of Monopoly, you ought to know the rules of the game. Because if you know the rules of the game, you probably stand a much better chance of winning. So that's the Monopoly board and the agency trap. There's a couple of other things about it, and I'll just dwell on one. If you were to run a poll, just a random poll, and ask the members of the poll, the people that are participating in the poll, do you think that the United States is bankrupt? Like actually bankrupt? Not just short of a few dollars, or their budget's a bit stretched at the moment. No, are they bankrupt? And I think the majority of people would say, no, they're not bankrupt. They're one of the richest nations in the world, aren't they? Well, the reality is that they are actually in Chapter 11 bankruptcy and have been since 1939. And the reason why that's significant is because in 1939, a mortgage was taken out over the entire monopoly board. So everything on the monopoly board, all of those legal titles, are held by those that control the monopoly board as their collateral. And that's why nobody's got legal title, or very few people have got legal title. There are some churches with legal title. But in the main, every asset on the monopoly board, the legal title has been mortgaged, and therefore it's collateral for the monopoly board, leaving everything else as to have no real substance. So the equitable title is just really another artificial construct. But you can sell the equitable title to someone else. If you want to sell the motor vehicle, you can transfer the equitable title to someone else. And if you want to sell the house, you can transfer the equitable title to someone else. And probably neither party will realize that all they're doing is transferring a title that has actually no substance at all. It's artificial, but it looks good, and people do it all the time, and that's why hardly anybody questions it. So I'm kind of setting the scene for how this game of Monopoly works. It doesn't mean to say that you can just turn your back on it and say, well, I now know how it works, I'm not going to play, because the agency causes you to play on the Monopoly board, whether you like it or not. Next slide. And this is what I was talking about. 1933, House Joint Resolution 192. I believe that everybody on the planet who's over the age of majority should know about this. It's one of the most pivotal pieces of knowledge that the majority of people have no idea about at all. And I think it is so pivotal because it's the legislation that basically controls the entire Monopoly board. And in 1933, when the United States went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which you can verify if you want to, you can go on the internet and put in their House Joint Resolution 192, and you'll see that James Traficant, the senator for Ohio, read out a statement in the United States Senate that it's the biggest reorganization in history, meaning it's the biggest bankruptcy in history. And what they did, you see, is they took away the gold from the people and they took away all the assets. So all of the assets of the entire world's Monopoly board were mortgaged then to those that run the board. And the biggest part of that was that they took a mortgage out over the energy of the people. So you see, your energy is mortgaged to the Monopoly board and those that run it. Now you might be thinking, well, how can someone take a mortgage out over my energy? You know, that sounds impossible. Well, not the way they've done it, it isn't. It's actually very possible, and it's going on all the time. You see, because what's really going on is every time you want to do something on this Monopoly board, you have to put some energy on the board. And when you put the energy on the board, it transfers from you, which is the rightful owner of it, because you created it. It comes from you, you're the originator, and it stays on the Monopoly board. And once it's on the Monopoly board, it's presumed to be abandoned energy. And that's very significant as we go through this presentation. So you see, they took a mortgage out over your energy. You didn't know you were playing Monopoly. You didn't know the board was bankrupt. You didn't know that those that control the board were taking your energy and using it for their own purposes. And then the worst thing about it is, and certainly in the case of a mortgage, they get you to pay for the use of your own energy. And that's where the modern slavery part comes in. So House Joint Resolution 192 means that everything on the Monopoly board is bankrupt. Everything on the Monopoly board is a debtor. The birth certificate construct is a debtor. All of these so-called wealthy, wealthy men and women are debtors, because they are all living men and women, agents for birth certificate constructs, which are, by the nature of them, debtors. They are not wealthy at all. They have zero assets, and they are a debtor. They are, the living man woman is representing a debtor on this Monopoly board, which has been mortgaged to those that run the board. Next slide. And Signature Energy. A couple of weeks ago, I published a paper about Signature Credit and what it is and how it works. And somebody said to me after they'd read it about how you could recoup Signature Credit energy. they said, Ian, I think this financial engineering you've done here could win the Nobel Prize. Now, I didn't say that, and I'll let you judge that for yourself. But if you look at Nobel Prize candidates for the Nobel Prize, it's generally things that have got the potential to make a big shift for the positive for mankind. It's my belief that recouping signature credit, arguably, and I would say this because I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours developing this, arguably it's the most important thing that anybody should be looking at the moment outside their health, because it's the game changer that the majority either don't know about or don't appear to want to know about it, which is even more bizarre to me. But let's have a look at signature energy, the source of value. So the living man, woman, as we've established so far, is the agent for the birth certificate construct. And let's suppose that you have got a bank account. The bank account's in the name of the birth certificate construct. So you're going to make some bank payments, okay? And you have to have something in the bank in order to make payments, yeah? So some energy would have flowed into your bank account from somewhere, because that's what money really is. Currency, energy. Yeah, it starts to make sense as to why it's called currency. So some currency is in the account, and you want to make some payments out of the account. And we call them payments because it sounds, it sounds like it has to be a payment. But how do you make a payment when everything on the monopoly board is bankrupt? And actually, in reality, there's no money of substance, because in 1933, House Joint Resolution 192, all of the so-called money became Federal Reserve notes or fiat currency. Suddenly became basically bits of paper, originally, now replaced by digital money. Some people have asked me, what do you think it's going to be like when there's digital money in place? You know, the CBDC. I said, we've already got it. We have already got it, by the way. So we're all now using digital money, which is just basically ledgers, which we'll come back to later. So when you make a bank payment, it looks very much like you're making a transfer from your bank account, which is the bank account in the name of the birth certificate construct, to someone else's bank account. And it looks like funds leave your account and arrive in the other account, the account belonging to the people you're trying to pay, if we're using common parlance. Well, that actually isn't happening at all. What's really happening is that when you make a bank payment, you are issuing a promise to pay in the future. You're issuing, like the banknote says, promise to pay the bearer. When you do a digital transfer, you're actually making a promise to pay in the future. You're not actually transferring currency from your account to another account. You are creating a brand new promise to pay in the future. And you're going to deposit that promise to pay in the future into the account of whoever it is you are trying to pay. So the word deposit is now coming into this webinar because it's very important. Every time you make a bank payment, you are actually depositing energy in somebody else's account. Every time you sign up for a loan or a mortgage or a credit card, you are depositing your energy with the bank, whatever the bank is. Let's just call them the clearing bank, that is going to use your energy, your deposit of energy, and create a mortgage or create a loan or create a credit card. So you see, what the banks do is they actually have no money at all, which is quite an extraordinary statement if you're new to my webinars. Just imagine that you were at a dinner table with a load of bankers, and it's one of those networking events where you don't actually know everyone at the table. In fact, you probably don't know anybody, and you're sitting there and you're making polite conversation like you do, and you ask the guys on the table who all appear to be working for the same bank, right? You say, "Oh, I notice you're all working for a bank," and they say, "Yeah, that's right. I've just taken out a mortgage." "Oh, really? Okay. Could you explain to me how that works?" And somebody in the group on the table is going to say, "Yeah, it's pretty easy, really. We take in deposits from our customers and we lend them out." Now you're sitting there thinking, well, that sounds logical, doesn't it? That sounds reasonable. The bank takes in deposits and then puts them in a pool somewhere or in a pot and then lends them out. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And then if the mortgage holder doesn't pay, then the bank seems to be morally morally correct to try and collect the interest, yeah, or maybe even foreclose on the property because the mortgage holder didn't pay the mortgage. And that's what a lot of bankers would believe, right? Because they don't know how it works. Professor Richard Werner spent 16 years studying how banks create money, because it isn't really anything, there's no substance to it, it's just ledgers, out of energy, the deposit of energy. So if you were to read Professor Richard Werner's research papers and his empirical study, you will see that there is no money of substance. There is just promises to pay in the future, and they are deposits, and the banks take them in when you sign something. So when you sign something, signing doesn't mean getting out a quill pen and dipping it in the ink and signing a bit of paper. It doesn't mean that. It means the intention of creating a transaction. So you don't even have to be there for there to be a signature credit deposit, because it could be a direct debit, it could be a bank standing order. There was an intention to create a deposit and use that deposit to discharge debts, because everything that you're doing is actually discharge. You can't pay anything because there's no money of substance. So all you can do is issue new securities, new promises to pay that are deposits that discharge something on the other side of a ledger. And that's what's going on. Professor Richard Werner wrote numerous papers about it, and the Bank of England confirms it in their Money in the Modern Economy. Many other research papers confirm it as well. Now, in the context of a mortgage, when you signed up for the mortgage, the bank, believe it or not, wasn't even permitted to lend you their money. If you look at the charter of any bank, it actually says that they are not permitted to lend their money. So that's an interesting fact, isn't it? Most people would say, well, that's ridiculous, Ian. How do banks operate if they can't lend their own money? Well, that's because they haven't any money to lend. What they do is they take in signature credit deposits and they convert them into debts. So when you sign up for a mortgage, you deposit into the bank your signature energy, your credit, and the bank says, thanks for that. And that automatically becomes theirs, right? So they take it as if it's their asset. And then on the other side of their balance sheet, this is an asset and this is a liability. They create a liability, a matching liability, and the asset stays with them and it gets abandoned. And this liability, which they created to match the asset on the other side of the balance sheet, is the mortgage. And they'll say at closing, oh, you'll find the balance in your account. The mortgage balance is in your account, as if they'd lent it to you, when of course they had no money to lend. There isn't any money anyway. all they did was create a debt security. This is the debt security. And what they did with it was that security was they then sold it to their friends. I describe them as the gods of the universe. These are the investment bankers in New York, who actually believe that they are gods, many of them. I've met quite a few of them. They're that arrogant, some of them, that they actually believe they're godlike. So that's what's going on when you create a signature. A signature doesn't have to be a debt, because everything is. It doesn't have to look like a debt, because everything is a debt. A bank payment is a debt. A mortgage, a credit card, a loan, they're all debts. They're all these debt instruments, and they all get sold to the investment banks, the gods of the universe in New York. Next slide. So let's go back to our Monopoly board. So remember, the Monopoly board is artificial. There's only artificial entities on the Monopoly board. It's like a hologram. You could try and step on it and your foot would go straight through it. Everything on this Monopoly board is artificial, including the banks, because they're artificial constructs as well, right? So it's just like looking at a hologram. All these things that look real are actually just artificial. They're just like holograms. And the banks have been put onto the Monopoly board. I was saying this yesterday on an interview. When you look at the game of Monopoly, it's lots of hotels on the Monopoly board. There actually should be lots of banks on the Monopoly board, because the banks have got a special role to play on the Monopoly board. Their role is the role of nominee. And if you look into what nominee means, it basically means a fiduciary or a trustee. So let me use an example. If I wanted to entrust my extremely valuable fountain pen, and I was looking around for someone to hold on to it for me, and I wanted to hand it over to Sims, because I trust her to look after my extremely valuable fountain pen. And I would say, Sims, would you be happy to look after my pen? And she would say, what would you say, Sims? Would you say yes?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just on mute then, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
So Sims
would
say yes. Right. Now, what we've just done there is created a trust. We didn't need a bit of paper.
Yeah.
I handed my extremely valuable fountain pen to Sims. She's holding on to it as my nominee, as my fiduciary, as my trustee. And that's what happens when you open up a bank account. When you transfer your energy through the birth certificate construct, which, by the way, is a banker. I didn't cover that, so I'll just cover that briefly now. The birth certificate construct, if you look in the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, it actually says that a body of persons is a banker. Well, what is a body of persons? That's the artificial construct of the birth certificate. So you see, the birth certificate construct, this artificial construct, is actually operating on the Monopoly board as a banker, which kind of makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because if it's going to issue securities, promises to pay in the future, if it's going to make deposits with banks, doesn't it have to be a banker to do that? The answer to that is yes, it does. So you see, the birth certificate construct is a banker, and it's depositing energy with other bankers. And the other bankers are operating as nominees, fiduciaries, trustees for the living man, woman who transferred their energy via the agency that they've got with the birth certificate construct onto the Monopoly board, and then they abandon the energy. And that's pretty much what's going on all the time, all around the world, is people are putting their energy on the Monopoly board and then abandoning it because they don't know what they've done. Nobody explained it. Nobody's probably going to explain it apart from someone like me. You can't buy a book that explains it. You don't learn it at university or at school. Your mum and dad don't tell you anything about it. The bankers that you might know don't understand it. The economists don't understand it, apart from a tiny percentage. The bankers and the financial advisors and the lawyers, none of these people understand it. And the reason why is because it's not taught anywhere. You have to find it out the hard way, like I have. You don't learn it by going to some course, because they literally don't teach this, which is why hardly any of the professionals, so-called, know about how this game of Monopoly really works. So you see, the nominees are very, very important. The banks are operating as nominees. That means that they are fiduciaries for you, the living man or woman. And whatever they claim that they own and control actually belongs to you. So they can't make a claim that they own your energy. You've put your energy on the monopoly board through the artificial construct of the person, the banker. You've entrusted it to the bankers that are now holding on to it and using it as your nominee. It doesn't belong to them, in the same way as the pen that I put into trust with Sims doesn't belong to Sims. It belongs to me. Yeah. But let's suppose she went off and used it, and she wrote a book with that pen, and it was a bestseller, and it earned hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties, right? That's what the bankers are doing with your energy. You entrusted your energy to them. They used it and made bundles and bundles of profit off the back of it, and then didn't bother to give you back the pen because it's your signature, yeah? So that's what's going on. And unless you realize that the energy belongs to you, and then one step more than that, one step further, you actually know how to get it back. It's not going to be, this knowledge is not going to be much use to you. And you might be thinking, well, Ian, I thought we were talking about mortgages, voiding mortgages. Yeah, you might be thinking, when are you going to start talking about that? Well, believe it or not, I already am. Next slide. Now, let's imagine that you don't know anything about what I have just explained, right? And you are enraged that you have just found out that the bank that you have got the mortgage with didn't lend you any money. Just imagine that you only knew that somehow this bank doesn't lend money, and you have been paying them every month because that's what's in the contract, and you decide that you've had enough of that and you're going to challenge them, and you might even go into court against them, and your claim is that they didn't lend me any money and therefore I'm not going to pay them, because there's no consideration in this contract, right? Consideration being they didn't lend any money, no consideration. And people have tried this, right? They've gone in to battle with the banks on the basis that they can prove that the bank, or they think they can prove it, the bank didn't lend them any money, or they just say it in their documents, their statements. Those arguments don't work. Many people have tried them. They absolutely do not work. And then something else comes along, which is called the registration gap. And this one sounds really powerful, right? So this one is the bank who didn't lend any money registered the debt security. Remember this debt that the banks create. They registered that with an investment bank and sold it on and transferred it to an investment bank. And whilst they were doing that, the bank that you took the mortgage out with, or the mortgagor, that's the so borrower, there was a gap between the registration of the mortgage charge over the property and the sale of the mortgage security to the gods of the universe in New York. There was a gap. It's called the registration gap. And people have gone in the courtroom with all of the technical proof that their mortgage wasn't registered properly at the land registry or wherever the property's registered. In the UK, it's called the land registry. It's a registry in other countries. And they argue that this mortgage charge over this property is unlawful because of the registration gap. Well, that doesn't work either, unfortunately. Many people have tried that, and it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the courts just say, well, we don't care about what happened in the background. Mortgage securitization, we don't really care about that. In fact, they don't even want to even understand what it is. All they care about is the fact that there is a legal charge over the property. And by the way, it's over the it's not over the property in terms of the legal ownership of the property. It's over the equitable ownership, that artificial equitable title that we spoke about earlier. So you see, all the courts care about is this charge that the mortgage provider has got lawful or not? Yes or no? Is it there on the land registry? Yes or no? If it's there, they don't care how it got there. They literally don't care how that charge got there, as long as it's there. So the only way you could ever prove that the mortgage had been created and that the charge was unlawful is if it hadn't been registered correctly. But they always do register them correctly because they make sure they do. So you see all these different arguments that have been put forward in courtrooms or in complaints, because some people start with complaints at the mortgage provider, basically don't work. And so they think they've got you by the short and curlies, right? They really do, because the charge over the property is all the courts care about. If you look at mortgage foreclosures, if you look at complaints about mortgages, if you just look at any kind of case where somebody's arguing that their mortgage is a void nullity, meaning it doesn't exist, will always lose the argument, because the court will always say, is there a charge, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, what are we doing here is what the judge will say, because there's a legal charge over the property. And that is all they care about in the courts, which is why nobody wins challenging the fact that the mortgage is a legal nullity, unless, of course, it really is a legal nullity and you can prove it. Most people can't prove it's a legal nullity because they don't know how to. But there is a way of proving that the mortgage is a legal nullity. Nullity means it doesn't exist. It has no substance. It's void from the beginning. That's what a legal nullity means. It's legalese, jargony terms. Next slide. Okay, so when you look at the arguments that I just mentioned, no consideration, the registration gap, they don't work, right? They literally do not work. Hundreds, thousands of people have tried them. People are probably trying them next week in courtrooms all over the world, not realizing that those arguments are never going to work. They've never worked anywhere in the world, and in my opinion, they never will work anywhere in the world, because as soon as they did work anywhere in the world, every single mortgage holder would use exactly the same argument to void their mortgage and get rid of it. You think about that? Is that likely to happen? Are the courts, who are there to protect the system, likely to let that happen? The answer is unlikely. Very, very unlikely. So you see, when you unpack this, and going back to my description of what do I do, and I said financial engineering. when you're doing engineering, you need to know what all the component parts are. I remember my dad told me when I was a teenager and I was getting involved in working on cars, believe it or not. He said to me, the best way to understand how an engine works, Ian, is to take it apart and then rebuild it. And I remember that. That's many years ago. And it's very true, right? So in financial engineering, you have to take all the components apart. And you've got to lay them on the desk in front of you and look at them and say, what are they all? What do they all do? Because unless you know what all the components are, you can't figure out how to find the Achilles heel of the mortgage market. So that's what I did. And one of the Achilles heels there's more than one, of the mortgage market is the fact that the banks are operating as nominees. Remember, they are fiduciaries, they are trustees of the energy that the living men and women have transferred onto the Monopoly Board. They are merely trustees, they are nominees, they don't own the credit. They don't own that signature credit energy. It's not theirs. Now, okay, you might be thinking, well, sounds very nice, Ian, but how's that going to help us void our mortgage? Well, I'm going to explain it to you in the next few slides. We've established, I think, so far that standard presentations in courtrooms don't work. So you've got to change the game to find something that does work. And the only way you can change the game is to fully comprehend how the mortgage works from A through Z, which is what I did. Looked at it from A through Z to find out which components of the mortgage construction could we reverse engineer, and could we take away the bank's power and take back the power? And the answer is you can. Next slide. And this is how you do it. So remember, the banks are operating as nominees for you, the living, breathing you, right? That's that you are the source of the energy. So when you create a mortgage by using signature, the signature and the energy is transferred through the birth certificate construct to the bank that is pretending that they've got money to lend when they have none. And that mortgage springs into existence. And the clearing bank, the mortgage provider, then creates this ex nihilo mortgage security and sells it to their friends in New York, in Wall Street, typically. Either directly or indirectly, it will end up in New York. They all do. And what they're actually doing is the investment banks in New York are using your energy every day of the week, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. They're using that credit energy, just like Sim's using my pen to write a best-selling novel. And she made a bundle of money off the back of it, right? And none of that belongs to me because she just used my pen, yeah? So the banks are using your energy like Sims could have used my pen to write a best-selling novel, right? And the banks then, they have to, and this is the most revealing and interesting part about this for me, right? The banks, the investment banks, because they're using your energy and everything on the Monopoly Board is bankrupt, they have to pay taxes for the use of your energy. And they pay the taxes to the United States Treasury. So remember, these are American investment banks who are using your energy because they hold them out as if they are the owners and the creditors to the mortgage securities that they purchased from the clearing banks, who are allegedly the mortgage providers. So these securities, and there are millions of them, are put into tranches, bundles. And if you want to know more about it, have a look at the movie The Big Short with Brad Pitt in it and a few other people. That's what the investment banks are doing. They bundle all of these mortgage securities into these bonds and they trade them, and they have taxes to the United States Treasury. And the reason why they pay taxes to the United States Treasury is because everything on the Monopoly Board is bankrupt. And the United States Treasury is the bankruptcy trustee for the entire Monopoly Board. So they collect taxes from the debtors, which are for the benefit of the creditors. That is what the United States Treasury's job is. Collect taxes from the debtors. In this scenario, the investment banks are the debtors, and they're paying the taxes to the United States Treasury as the bankruptcy trustee for the entire Monopoly Board. So the question is, who do those taxes belong to? Let's imagine that you had a property, and forget about legal title and equitable title. Let's imagine that you owned a property outright and you wanted to rent it out to some tenants. So you did. And then you looked in your account and you thought, where's the rent? I'm not seeing any rent coming in my account. So you look into it and you realize the tenants are paying the rent to somebody else. How would you feel? Would you try and rectify that and get the rent coming into your account? Or would you just leave it like that and say, well, never mind. I don't mind if my tenants pay the rent to someone else. Well, that's what you're doing with your Signature Credit Energy. You transferred it onto the Monopoly Board. You then abandoned it. The investment banks are using it and paying taxes to the United States Treasury for using your energy, and you're not claiming that tax because you didn't know you could. So you see, IRS publication 1212 is very pivotal to this remedy, this void mortgage remedy, because when you realize how the game works through nominees. So in order to play the game of Monopoly in terms of what we do, is you have to create new nominees. And that new nominee is an international grantor trust. And you put that new piece on the Monopoly Board. So remember, you've got the player piece, which is the citizen, the person, the birth certificate construct. That's the player piece that most people use on the Monopoly Board. But then you've also got the opportunity to put other player pieces on the Monopoly Board. So imagine that you put an international grantor trust with its own tax reference number, its own footprint, and recognition with the United States Treasury, but it was an independent grantor trust, an international and independent grantor trust that isn't registered to the state, where the birth certificate construct is the grantor of it, meaning the creator of it, and it appoints a professional trustee, and it also appoints a tax filing professional with a license to file tax returns to the United States Treasury. So you've now got this new player piece on the Monopoly Board, and it can fire in tax returns to the United States Treasury. And let's imagine that it fired in what's called a 1099 OID tax return to the United States Treasury and put down the investment bank that is holding your mortgage security as the nominee to redirect the taxes that the investment bank is paying the United States Treasury away from the United States Treasury to the International Grantor Trust. Because that International Grantor Trust is the nominee for the true creditor, the living man woman. See, the living man woman is the beneficiary of that grantor trust structure. And the 1099 OID achieves two things. The first thing is it removes the presumption that the investment bank is the creditor of the mortgage. And the second thing it does is it redirects the taxes that the United States Treasury has collected from that investment bank and redirects the taxes as the property of the International Grantor Trust. Now, unless you hadn't realized, the filing of that 1099 OID in terms of voiding a mortgage is one of the most significant parts of this whole process. Why? Because the presumption remember in the courtroom earlier on, the arguments could have been, look, the bank didn't lend me any money. They're not the creditors. And the judge is going to go, I don't care about that. All I care about is the fact that there's a charge against the property. So unless you can tell me there's no charge on the property, you lose. Well, suppose you could tell the judge with forensic evidence that the charge that the alleged mortgage provider holds on the property is completely unlawful because the mortgage provider is no longer the creditor. And if they're no longer the creditor, how can they have a charge over the property? And let's imagine that you were able to provide that evidence, not as a story, but with forensic proof. Because the grantor trust that was established and put onto the Monopoly Board that filed the 1099 OID gets a confirmation from the IRS, the United States Treasury, that it has now become what's called the holder in due course of the credit energy. It's not speculation, it's a fact, and it can be proved. And that changes the whole nature of the mortgage relationship. So no longer now is the birth certificate construct the debtor to the mortgage. Because the creditors, the perceived creditors, the mortgage provider and the investment bank, their position has now been changed to the debtor position, not the creditor position, because of the filing of the 1099 OID. And as I say, it's not speculation. It can be forensically proved. Next slide. And that's what you're doing. You're correcting the record, creating a grantor trust, which sits on the Monopoly Board, and it becomes the holder in due course. And you are correcting the ledger at the very, very top. You cannot get any higher than the United States Treasury. That's where all of these securities at the top of the ledgers are being reconciled at the United States Treasury. So when the 1099 OID is being filed and the grantor trust becomes the holder in due course, as can be proven by the tax filings and the confirmation that the IRS issues, now the whole game has changed, as I mentioned on the previous slide. The investment bank is no longer the creditor, and nor is the clearing bank, the mortgage provider. And it can be proven. Next slide. Holder in due course. Very, very significant. If you look into the law, which you need to comprehend in the sense of what we're talking about here, The holder in due course, in regards to credit, in regards to mortgages, in regards to the securities that the investment banks are paying taxes against, is one of the most significant phrases to learn. Holder in due course, HDC. Once the grantor trust is recognized as the holder in due course, it collapses the creditor presumption, because that's all it is. The investment banks and the clearing bank, the mortgage provider, presume that they are the creditors. But you can now prove that they're not the creditors, they are the debtors, because the International Grantor Trust is now recognized by the United States Treasury as the holder in due course. And that corrects the record. And it collapses the mortgage. And it voids the mortgage charge. Next slide. And not only can you say it, you can prove it. So you're not going to say it in some document and expect everyone to believe it. You can actually prove it. Because the investment banks, they pay taxes for the use of your energy on what they call their 945 tax module. So why would they be paying taxes to rent your energy? That's because it doesn't belong to them. And because they're paying taxes for the use of your energy, and you can track that, because our system tracks it, you can now prove that they pay taxes on the use of your energy, because it says so on their 945 tax return. And it also is proven because the IRS confirms it when the trust, that's the grantor trust, files the 1099 OID. And last year, before it was sabotaged, we had 600 million of confirmed grantor trust recoupments where the creditor position had been established by the trust as the holder in due course. And just yesterday, there was the last of a series of interviews done on the ROS media platform, confirming, holding up the wages and tax transcripts to confirm without any doubt that this process 100% works. Not only did we have wages and tax transcripts in 2025, that before the sabotage event, but people in 2024 got their checks from the IRS because the position of holder in due course was established, and the signature credit was paid out by way of checks, multiple checks in 2024. So you see, if you've got an algorithm, which we do, by the way, that tracks everything from A through Z, all the way down to the 945 tax ledger that the investment banks are paying the IRS stroke Treasury, you can prove the whole mortgage has been basically been corrected at the top of the ledger. And you can prove it on the 1099 OID filing, and you can prove it because the investment bank has been paying taxes on the use of your energy on their 945 tax return. And that tax is now the property of the grantor trust. Next slide. So you might be thinking, well, it all sounds really interesting, Ian, but how on earth are you going to use this information to void your mortgage? Well, I'm going to explain how you do it. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to create the International Grantor Trust. You've got to be doing signature credit recoupment because you need to change the holder in due course position to the grantor trust. Remember that the birth certificate construct is the grantor of this trust. The trust is international. It is a creditor trust. It has a reference number with the United States Treasury. It's been specifically set up for the purposes of tax filings. It has a professional trustee appointed to it. It has a professional tax filing license holder, an ERO, attached to it to file the 1099 OID. Before we even get to filing the 1099 OID, an algorithm which we've developed tracks the signature energy credit from the mortgage provider all the way through to the investment bank, and then all the way through to their 945 tax ledger. So the whole journey of your signature credit can be tracked. No matter when you took the mortgage out, it's tracked. I wrote a research paper on this yesterday. Sims will be sending it out to you. You can see exactly how they do this, and you can see exactly how we track your signature energy. No matter how many years ago the mortgage was created, it doesn't matter. There is a way, we've now developed a way to track it, the signature credit energy from the mortgage, from the signature to the 945 tax ledger. Now, in order to prove that the mortgage, the alleged creditors, that's the mortgage provider who sold the security to the investment bank in New York, or via some intermediary group, it ends up in New York. You take out a case against the investment bank. They are known as indentured trustees. Okay, so they are holding your energy right now. If you've got a mortgage, there is an investment bank in New York that is holding on to your energy, and they are paying taxes right now every year on your energy to the United States Treasury. So go back to that property. You've got a property and the tenants are paying rent to someone else. You've got energy sitting in the securities in New York right now, if you've got a mortgage or ever had a mortgage, and the investment banks are paying the taxes to the United States Treasury, and you're not collecting it, like you're not collecting the rent in my analogy. So what you're going to do now is you're going to issue what's called an adverse claim against the investment bank. That's and they're known as indentured trustees, which is an interesting term, isn't it? Because remember, I put my quill pen into trust with Sims earlier on. So you see the investment banks run indentured trustee departments, massive, because they are trustees for you, indentured trustees for your energy. And you issue what's called an adverse claim against the investment bank that basically says that you have now corrected the record by your grantor, well, not you, the grantor trust has corrected the record, the IRS has corrected the ledger, and they are no longer the creditor. So you're putting in an adverse claim against them because you want them to confirm that they agree with you. They typically don't agree at that stage, by the way, because they want to hold on to the fact that they want to be perceived to be the creditor. So it goes to court. It's all done on paper filings in New York, in the New York District Court, and you file a forensic securitization report, which, by the way, our system creates, which tracks the signature energy, your credit, from the moment that you sign the mortgage papers, whenever that was, all the way through until the investment bank is paying taxes on the 945 ledger. And everything that happened from A through Z is documented in a securitization and holder in due course report, which names the mortgage provider, it names the investment bank, it names the investment bank security, it details the taxes the investment bank's been paying, it details the 1099 OID that you filed via your grantor trust, it details the confirmation from the IRS that the ledger has now been changed and the grantor trust is the holder in due course, leaving the investment bank with nothing to argue apart from bullshit. And bullshit doesn't normally win in courtrooms because you've got all the facts. And the indentured trustees have got a big problem. And that is that they are governed by the Indentured Trustee Act of 1939. And they can't lie, especially when you've got all the forensic evidence. So they have to give up their hopeless argument that they're still the creditor, because you've got, if you were playing poker with the investment bank, the indentured trustee, you've got a royal flush. If you know anything about poker, you'll know that that's pretty powerful, right? And the investment bank's got a pair of twos. If you know anything about poker, you know that's not very good. Next slide. And you see the investment bank indentured trustee, they can't afford to lie because they'll lose their license. And they are governed by the Indentured Trustee Act of 1939. And they are supposed to operate with integrity and honour as prudent persons. And you've put in a claim against them. And if they lie and say that they're still the creditor when they're not, then that would breach all of their, breach the Indentured Trustee Act of 1939. You could sue them for telephone numbers if they were to do that. And you'd win. Because they can't prove that they ever were the creditor. And they definitely can't prove that they're the creditor to the mortgage now, because you've got all the proof in your report. And you've got the proof from the IRS. So then a pair of twos isn't going to win against a royal flush. Next slide. And then what you do, armed with that very, very powerful hand that you've now got that's been confirmed in the New York District Court, you now go back to the mortgage provider and you instruct them to remove the mortgage charge, because they know they are no longer the creditor. They never were the creditor. And now you've got the proof that they are definitely not the creditor. And guess what that does? That invalidates the charge over the property. The very thing that the courts rely upon is no longer got any validity in the law, because the mortgage provider can only have that charge all the time that they are the creditor. Well, you've now proven that they never were the creditor, and they definitely aren't the creditor at the moment, because you've got the proof from New York. You've got the proof from your securitization report. You've got the proof from the IRS filings. And you know what else you've got? You've got the actual signature credit recoupment that will be received by the International Grantor Trust. So what more proof do you need? When the IRS pays out to your International Grantor Trust the value of the mortgage as redirected signature credit, taxes, what more proof would you need? Are you getting the picture? I hope so. Next slide. So it's going to take you a while, no doubt, to figure this out and probably replay this a few times, because these things don't come, they don't percolate, they don't land first time probably for a lot of people. I will be doing an interview with Andy Benson on Tuesday, answering all your questions. I will also be doing other interviews about this, because a lot of people are interested in it. So you'll be able to see me explain it again, maybe in a different way. And there's documents that describe it. And it's not a theory. Everything I've told you about is real. So how do you put it in place? Well, you're going to need a few component parts to make this work, right? the very first thing that you need to make this work is the envoy protocol. You've got to clean up the agency. You remember the agency? The living man is the agency. Living man, woman is the agent of the birth certificate construct. You've got to clean that up. And you can do that with the envoy protocol, which gives you superior standing. It makes a difference when you're doing the tax returns as well, through your grantor trust. You do that and you operate as the general executor of the decedent estate. Remember, the birth certificate is a decedent estate. So you correct the records by declarations, and that's the envoy status. You become an envoy of the Republic of Old Souls. It actually gives you elevated standing on the Monopoly Board, because an envoy of a ministry, because Republic of Old Souls is a registered ministry, gives you elevated standing. And it also cleans up the records in terms of the agency, you as the agent of the body corporate construct. It cleans it up. So you need that. That's the envoy protocol. Next slide. Now what you're going to need is you're going to need another international grantor trust. So you've already got one if you're doing this, which is the tax filing, the 1099 OID grantor trust. Now you need a separate one. You need a second one. And you might be thinking, why do you need two, Ian? Why can't I just have one? Well, the first one has a professional trustee, and it has a tax filing license holder to file the tax returns. That one is specifically there for receiving the signature credit recoupments. The second one, which is the Asset Fortress Protocol, is going to operate as your private treasury. All of the rich families have a private treasury, I can assure you. They have normally a trust structure, and they have a bank account connected to it, and they put all their assets in there, and they operate their trust as their treasury. So that's what you need. You need the Asset Fortress Protocol. It protects you from digital ID. It enables you to run banking through a trust. So you don't need to use the birth certificate construct banking accounts anymore. You can use them if you want, but you don't need to. And it's an international grantor trust. It doesn't have to report anything to anybody. With one caveat, if you are United States, if you're the agent for a United States citizen, then you will need a 508c1a, which is a ministry. And I'm going to explain all that on an interview with Andy Benson next week. But let's just call it the Asset Fortress Protocol. It's a private treasury, and it doesn't have to report anything to anyone. It doesn't have to pay taxes. It has no obligation to pay taxes. It has no obligation to report anything. It's a private treasury. And also, once it receives the signature credit recoupment from the first grantor trust, and then it can spend and recoup, because the signature of the spending is the same signature that created the mortgage, the bank payments, the credit cards, the loans, everything that you've been doing since the age of majority. It's the same signature that is being used within the Asset Fortress Protocol. Spend and recoup that signature credit recoupment in infinity cycles. Next slide. And that's what you get with the currency creation protocol. I've only talked to you about the mortgage, right? So you have a mortgage and you want to avoid it. Well, now I want you to widen your horizons. Let's imagine that you could recoup all of the face value of every bank payment that you've made from the age of 18 or 21. Look at all those deposits you've made from the age of 18 or 21. Bank payments. You're not actually recouping the bank payments. You're recouping the taxes from the investment banks who've used your credit energy, your signature credit energy. Let's imagine that you could recoup the face value of every other mortgage that you may have ever had. Let's imagine that you could recoup the signature energy of every credit card loan that you've ever had from the age of 18 or 21, depending on which country you're in. Just do some rough maths. How much is that? The face value of every mortgage, the face value of every bank payment, the face value of every credit card, the face value of every loan. Since the age of 18 or 21. What are you talking about? Hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions? That is currency creation. So what you do is you write down every the rough estimate of everything that you deposited. Your signature was used to make a deposit. That's a bank payment. That's the creation of a mortgage. That's the creation of a credit card, the creation of a loan. You write it down by year. Every year since age 18 or 21. You need to remember the bank that you deposited your signature with, and you need to know the name of the mortgage provider, the name of the credit card, the name of the loan provider. And roughly estimate how much do you think you spent or used your signature to make deposits in those years. It doesn't need to be precise, because nobody can remember precisely. You estimate it year by year, add it up. Now what you can do is your grantor trust that you've created, which has got this professional trustee, it's got a tax filing license holder, the ERO. What they're going to do is they're going to run the algorithm, which is going to track all of that signature credit from the clearing banks all the way through to the investment banks. There's going to be a whole range of recoupments that are going to be executed by the electronic reporting officer, the licensed tax filing agent that is connected to your international grantor trust. So multiple 1099 OIDs can be filed. Probably for most of you on this webinar, we're talking multiples of millions, which includes the mortgage that we're actually talking about voiding, right? It's one of the things that you're going to be recouping. And all of that signature credit then comes into your grantor trust, the 1099 OID tax filing grantor trust, as well as you've now proven that the mortgage that you're now, the one you're focusing on is void because you've corrected the record. That recoupment then goes from the 1099 OID trust, it is then transferred to your Asset Fortress protocol. When you can now spend from the Asset Fortress protocol, and because when you spend, that creates new signature credit, you then recoup it in the next year. Spend and recoup. Next slide. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, Ian, can we give you a call and you can set all this up for us? How about you come round for dinner one night? If I could, I would. We'll have a chat, and you can write all the paperwork up, and we'll make you a nice dinner, and you can sort it all out for us. Yeah. Might even buy you a beer. And by the way, I was a wealth manager for a long time, and I did that a lot, right? I used to go around in my very early career. I used to go around people's houses, and they used to make me dinner and buy me give me a beer or a glass of wine because I sorted out all their finances for them. I've done that thousands of times, by the way. but I'm not going to do it anymore for lots of reasons. But here's the next best thing, right? Next week, we are launching the Ian Clifford Avatar. And the Ian Clifford Avatar has got millions of bits of data that's been downloaded to it. All of my research reports that you may or may not be aware of that are out of Ecclesia Law, all of the webinars that I presented in the last, certainly the last 6 months, I think it's more than that. Every single interview I've done, every Q&A that I have done that's been recorded is all in the Ian Clifford Avatar's knowledge. And when you're looking at a void mortgage or voiding a mortgage, all of the knowledge to do that, everything from A through Z is in the Avatar, which is also connected to an AI system. So if you imagine, right, that you wanted to do this and you didn't know where to start, we're going to be doing the Envoy protocol for you. We're going to do the Asset Fortress protocol. We're going to create the international grantor trust, appoint the trustee, appoint the tax filing, licensed tax filing agent. We're going to set all the banking up. We're going to do all of that stuff. But there's one thing that we're not going to do for you, because you're going to do it if you want to do this. And that is, you are going to issue the adverse claim to the investment bank. You are going to issue the paperwork in the New York court. And you're going to use an AI system, which is going to create all of the documents that you need, bespoke for your case. That's going to create the mortgage securitization report for you, bespokely for your mortgage. And if you've got any questions about what it is you're doing and how you're doing it, you don't invite me round for dinner as much as I'd like to come. You ask the Avatar. And the Avatar's got arguably more knowledge than me, because it's also got its own database that it's pulling down in relation to the law in New York, in UK, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand. It knows the law. And it also knows everything I've been talking about on this webinar and every other webinar and every research paper and every Q&A. And every time I do a new webinar and every time I do a new Q&A and every time I write a new research report, and by the way, I write probably 5 to 10 a week. Those internally will know that, because I keep saying, read this, read this, read this. That knowledge base is going to be ever evolving. Every problem and solution that we're presenting on these webinars will be loaded into its memory. I'm excited by that, because I can't go around everybody's house for dinner, but I can give them the Avatar and the AI. Next slide. And the best part about all of this is that not only can you void the mortgage, but you can start recouping your signature credit from the age of 18 or 21. And then you can spend it and recoup it. Spend it and recoup it year in, year out. And if you think all this sounds like a bit of a fairy tale, Sims is going to send you the interview that was done by Andy Benson. It was only recorded yesterday. And Ange, who heads up our technology platform, and she's been instrumental with me in developing all of these systems that track and trace all the credit, that do all the tax filings and all of that stuff I've talked about. Ange has been involved in the project from the beginning with me. And Andy is asking her to talk about what she's been doing, how she's been doing it. And then they've got on the screen, they've actually got wages and tax transcripts, which is absolute categoric proof from the IRS in 2025 of north of $600 million of signature credit wages tax transcripts that cannot be argued because they're in black and white. They're on bits of paper. They're in our system. They're absolute proof that this works. And if you think, well, that's all very nice, but that still doesn't prove the mortgage is void. Many of those were mortgages. So the proof of the mortgage, the creditor position has changed to the grantor trust, away from the investment bank, away from the mortgage provider, is confirmed by that wages and tax transcript. Next slide.
So, wow, what a presentation. And as you remember, Ian, I said at the beginning that you were going to show our attendees today a complete pathway to remove that burden, which I think you have demonstrated today. So, as you know, there were questions that have been submitted. We've been going through all the top questions, and well, if you're ready, let's go through them. But just before we do, just a polite reminder, this presentation is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our platform. So as Ian mentioned, there is a lot of information that he's delivered today. So, I do encourage you to go back onto the platform, watch and keep rewatching, and you will all suddenly get the penny will certainly drop there, because this is all fantastic information that's been delivered today. There are also handouts which complements today's webinar, which are coming up in the next couple of slides, but they will be available for you on the platform. As Ian has also mentioned, after today's webinar, all attendees, I will be sending you an email mentioned about the interview that Andy Benson and Ange did yesterday. So you'll have that link and you can go through that as well. So I just want to do some polite reminders, but let's jump straight into the top 7 questions. So Ian, question number 1. Since the global commercial system is operating in a state of Chapter 11 bankruptcy under HJR 192, how can I stop acting as a pauper and start operating as a master on the Monopoly Board?
Well, you can't change the Monopoly Board, but what you can do is you can create a nominee, 2 actually. You can create one to do your tax filings for you. That's your 1099 OIDs. And you can create another one, which is the Asset Fortress, which is another nominee sitting on the Monopoly Board that's independent of any country that can operate as your private treasury. And then to clean up the agency, you see, everybody's been using the name on the birth certificate as if it were them. So everyone, including me, we held ourselves out as if we were the birth certificate. And of course we're not. So there's something called clausula rebus sic stantibus, which is a declaration that you've mistakenly used the birth certificate name in error, and you're cleaning up the record. And you're also claiming that you are alive. The living being is alive, which might sound ridiculous. But they actually treat all the living men and women as if they were dead. And the birth certificate construct is dead as well. So the Envoy protocol cleans the record up, and that enables you to operate as the master. You see, you are the birth certificate construct is a banker, but the banker, the birth certificate construct itself, cannot recoup signature credit energy. And the reason why it can't lawfully do it is because it's registered to the state. It's theirs. It's like the house. It's like the car. It's like the factory or the hotel or whatever. But the grantor trusts are not registered to the state. They are there for your benefit. You are, the living man woman is the beneficiary of those 2 grantor trusts, one for tax filings, one for private treasury, and the Envoy protocol elevates the standing so that you actually get ministerial status. which is why it's called the Envoy protocol. That's how you do it.
Okay, thank you for that. Question number 2. How does the separation of the living soul from the birth certificate construct allow an individual to enjoy the use of assets without being personally liable for commercial debts or state taxes?
The question presumes that you can separate. In fact, you can't really separate. The agent cannot be separated from the principal. The principal is the birth certificate construct. The agent is the living man, woman. What you can do is you can't separate it, no matter what anybody tells you. It's all bullshit if they say that you can separate it and collapse the birth certificate construct. It's a myth if anybody says that you can do that, and you wouldn't want to do that. Why would you want to do that? You need that birth certificate construct because it provides you with access to the monopoly board. It's the conduit for the energy going on the board. So far, going forward, that conduit will be the Asset Fortress protocol. But the living soul is the agent. But what you want is the agency to be cleaned up. And that's what you really want to do. When people say, oh, how do I get rid of liabilities? The only way you can get rid of liabilities is to discharge them. So you either discharge them by striking them out because they're void, or you get rid of them by discharging them. So let me just give you an example. Let's suppose that you start doing this and you've got the Asset Fortress protocol set up, and the birth certificate construct gets a tax bill for $1 million. Now, by the way, we can discharge tax bills, but let's suppose that we couldn't. That's US tax bills, by the way. Let's suppose that it's in Canada. It's 1 million Canadian dollars tax bill. It's, oh my God, how are we going to deal with that? But in your private treasury, your Asset Fortress protocol, you've got $3 million sitting in your Asset Fortress protocol, right? So what do? The Asset Fortress protocol sends $1 million Canadian dollars to the Canadian tax authorities to discharge the taxes. And that signature credit of $1 million can then be recouped back to the Asset Fortress protocol. So you see, that's how you get rid of liabilities. You discharge them from your Asset Fortress protocol.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Question 3. Is it possible to recoup millions in abandoned signature credit and credit energy generated from mortgages, loans, and utility payments since the age of majority?
Yeah, and you can go one step further. It can be mortgages, loans, credit cards, bank payments. They're all securities, right? So add them all up, and it might come to many millions. You'd be surprised, right? You're talking about a lifetime of economic activity here. And it's going to come to a high value, I'm sure. Unless you're 18 and 3 days of age, you're going to have quite a bit of credit on that board.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got many 18-year-olds on here. I shouldn't think. So everybody on here is probably, it'd be interesting to do an exercise of how much signature credit everybody on this webinar, if you added it all together, how much it would come up to.
Yeah.
It would be a staggering amount, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It'd be an interesting number, wouldn't it?
Do you know, it's funny, I was sitting here working it out myself, going, right, okay, since the age of 18, what have I earned? Few years back, that was.
A few years ago, yeah, in that long and distant past, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about me here. It's my long and distant past.
No, it's me too, Ian. So, and I'm not shy. Age is only a number.
Well, that's true, yeah. So, is it possible to do it? Well, let me answer that question. In a research paper I published about a month ago, somebody asked me a question. Ian, this signature credit recoupment, the Clifford Protocol that you call it, it sounds and looks amazing, but it's not going to work, is it? I actually went to lunch with somebody who told me this, right? It's not going to work, is it, Ian? And I said, oh yeah, why is that? Well, it's going to bankrupt the United States Treasury, isn't it? And I said, oh really? Why do you believe that? Well, if this could run into billions of dollars, Ian. Don't you realise that if thousands, hundreds of thousands of envoys of Republic of Old Souls is doing this, that's now billions of dollars. Did you not realise that, Ian? And I said, no, I did realise that. I haven't just looked at this in terms of 5 people doing it. I've looked in terms of 500,000 people doing it, which is about the cap, right? Yeah. Now, when you understand that everything is created, all money, what we call money, is created ex nihilo. There should be no poverty in the world, but there is. Governments raising taxes, they shouldn't need to do that because they're all creating creating money ex nihilo out of the signature of the people. So once you get your head around that, then you say, okay, so the investment banks are paying taxes to the United States Treasury. How much tax are they paying? Well, if you look at the last 3 years, it's somewhere between 50 and $100 billion a year in taxes. That is the budget that we have got to recoup. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't think Donald Trump's going to be very happy about that, is a 50 to 100 billion of taxes that are going to be redirected to these grantor trusts. He's not going to be happy with that, is he? He won't even notice it. Nobody at the United States Treasury is going to notice it. And the reason why is because there is no money. It's just redirecting ledgers. If you've ever wondered how they keep pulling out rabbits out of a hat to finance things like wars and anything else that's going on, so-called pandemics, how did they finance all of that? Yeah, that's because it's all ex nihilo credit. It's just ledgers. It's just numbers on ledgers. The Treasury is there. Their job is to redirect the credit energy, the taxes, to the creditors. And you are a creditor. The living man, woman is a creditor. You rightfully have an entitlement to this credit energy tax rebate. It's not going to bankrupt them. And you can do multiple millions every year, not just once, every year. Spend and recoup it.
Ian, that last comment you've just said about multiple millions, is there a cap, however? Because there could be, we may have some high net worth individuals, but is there a cap at all?
Well, there is by grantor trust. The maximum that you can recoup per grantor trust is $10 million. But we have got some heavy hitters in our envoy group, and you can set up more than one grantor trust. So you could have 10 grantor trusts, each one of them capped at 10 million, 100 million. I don't think many people are going to need 100 million, but and going forward, we will not want to facilitate amounts of that magnitude, because that would, if everybody was doing 50 to 100 million, which would be ridiculous, the number of envoys we can recruit for our sovereign nation, which is what this is really all about, is it's going to be diminished, and that, I don't want that. So
no, we want to give everyone the opportunity. And just to also clarify, because there are other countries that uses dollars as well as a currency, but we're talking US dollars, aren't we?
Yeah, it's all US dollars, but the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Everything's balanced back to dollars, even though people don't want to admit it. They want to tell you that they're doing their own currencies and their own payment systems, and they probably are. But there's still the reserve currency of the world, still the dollar.
Yeah. I just felt it was important just to clarify that, so there's no misunderstandings. But thank you for answering that question as well, because there was a question that also came through as well on the registration form. Okay, question number 4. Can the Asset Fortress Protocol hold assets in fee simple title to place them beyond the reach of state registries, liens, and jurisdictional overreach?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. In fact, I wrote another research paper on this. It's on ecclesial law, because a lot of people get very confused about the difference between, there are 3 types of title. There's fee simple, there's legal, and then there's equitable. There are 3 types of titles. And it all depends, is the answer. It depends on how the property is being registered already. Churches normally can get the fee simple or allodial title without any problem, because they have covenants on the land that enable them to do it. But if you're in an apartment block, there's no way you can get a allodial title, because you don't own the ground. And if you own a house or a farm or something like that, or you think you do because you've actually got the equitable title, then it may be possible, but it depends on how the legal title is being registered. It's different in every country. Every case is different. We will be providing an avatar specifically and an AI system specifically for this, because it's a question that comes up very, very frequently. So if you want to transfer the title of property and assets to your asset fortress, you'll be able to do that with the benefit and help of an AI and an avatar combination, if it's possible, which it probably is in most cases, but not in every case.
Okay, thank you for answering that, Ian. Question 5. Does the use of a 98 series international grantor trust and corrective 1099 OID filings provide a lawful mechanism to redirect withheld taxes from institutional nominees to a private treasury?
Well, I've been looking at this for a long time, and I don't know of any other way of doing it lawfully. This pathway is the only pathway that I can see that does it lawfully. Other people do. There's something called a 1099B tax filing. It's called a barter exchange. Some people do that. I don't think it's lawful. Other people file 1099 OID from the taxpayer. That's the citizen, the birth certificate construct. And some of them get a check. That's completely unlawful. It's RICO fraud. It's wire fraud, and people have gone to jail for doing it. And yet still people are still trying it that way, because they do not understand it. They just haven't done their research. Maybe even if they did research, they wouldn't have figured it out, because maybe they're not bright enough.
Okay, thank you for that. Question 6. How does the Envoy protocol utilize the international law principle of clausula rebus sic stantibus to rescind presumed agency to the state and occupy the office of the General Executor?
Well, it's done on declarations. So a declaration is powerful. It's like, if you know about Harry Potter and the wand, it's like you issuing a spell, right? A declaration is like a spell. It's like a wish. It doesn't get registered in some database somewhere and then everyone treats you differently. It's a declaration, just like a declaration of war. It's a declaration of standing and status, and it's the rescission of the fraudulent use of the name, which is identity fraud. It's a rescission of that, and it cleans it up, because everyone's got a dirty record, I'm afraid, including me, until you clean it up, because everybody used the birth certificate name thinking it was them, and that muddies the waters, which is deliberate, by the way. So you've got to clean that up. You do it by declaration, and you invoke your right of clausula rebus sic stantibus. That's your right to declare that.
Lovely, thank you for that. Question 7. Can the spend and recoupment cycle truly create self-sustaining infinite loop where every expenditure from a private treasury becomes a new credit creation event?
Yeah, because it's signature credit. The grantor and the trustee of the Asset Fortress Protocol is the birth certificate construct. The banker, remember, it's a banker under the Bills of Exchange Act 1882. So every new deposit made from the Asset Fortress Protocol, deposit, remember, that's what you might want to call a bank payment. That is a deposit of Credit Energy. And it's the recoupment of that deposit through the tax process that I've explained today, that you're just doing it from a different venue. You're doing it from the Asset Fortress Protocol as opposed to doing it from the birth certificate construct. So yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Okay, well, that ends those questions. But as we both mentioned earlier, all attendees today will receive an email from me with the link. If you can submit those questions ASAP for any additional questions that you may have, and then Ian will answer those. So Andy will ask Ian your questions. So that link will be sent out later. Don't forget, submit your questions. I'll go on to the next slide.
So, if you want to know about how to do the Envoy protocol, how to get started with the Asset Fortress, the currency creation. In fact, next webinar, I'm talking about how we're going to be bundling these together into a bundle. So that will all be revealed next Saturday. But if you want to talk to one of our consultants about the protocols, you click on the link. I don't know if you're going to do it, Simzo. You click on the link.
Yeah, I'm going to do it right now.
Takes you to a website, and then you can book. You put your email address in that you use to go into our platform, and now you can book in with one of our consultants, which is done on a platform. It looks like it's downloading something. It's going to be doing it on Calendly, so booking the meeting on Calendly.
Hold a moment.
That looks like it's hung to me.
Yeah, it's just, I think my internet's a bit slow today. Something seems slow. But it is very straightforward. Here we go. It's coming through. Wakey internet. How rude. Sorry, everyone. It was just a little bit of delay there. But as you can see, I've logged in. Now, this link will be included in the email as well. So when you click on that link, as Ian said, make sure you use the email address that we have registered on the platform. But as you can see, one of our lovely consultants, Paul, so that's who's assigned to, and you just click on there and it will come up with all dates today. Very simple, very straightforward. But if your timings and, for example, Paul's timings don't match up, then of course we've got the rest of our wonderful team, and all you need to do is just click on their availabilities and go from there. So it's very simple. And
just so everybody also knows this, because I think it's important, when you have that meeting in the very near future, and maybe even from Tuesday, depending on the rollout of the avatar, you can actually include the avatar in that meeting. So when you're having a meeting with the consultant, you and the consultant, because with the best will in the world, our consultants don't know what I know, and they probably never will, because I've been doing this for 42 years. So they're not going to know everything I know. So you can ask the Ian Clifford avatar on the meeting. That's coming very soon. It may be as early as Tuesday. But in the absence of that, they do know a lot, and they definitely know about the protocols. But if you want to ask things outside the protocols on that meeting, they may or may not know the answer. They probably do have a good go at it. But going forward, that avatar will be available, and you will have that avatar with you. So once it's launched, everybody will be given a access to that avatar that you can ask it questions whenever you want. And you'll also be able to ask questions about what is going on with your process. So rather than having to log into the platform to figure out what's happening, which is all in there, by the way, but many people don't do it, you'll be able to go to the avatar and say, hey, Ian, what's happening with my Envoy protocol? Hey, Ian, what's happening with my Asset Fortress? Hey, Ian, what's happening with my credit recoupments on my bank, on the banks that I've put together? And it will tell you.
Powerful. Very powerful indeed. I've jumped onto the next slide in about the links. If you want to go through that again, I will be ensuring that every attendee today will get these links, but I don't know if you want to go through them as well.
Yeah, you mean basically you've got, I don't know, I think sometimes we give too much information out because a lot of people overwhelms them, but we that's me, because I'm very detailed. I'm very factual based. I've come from a professional background, and you have to prove everything in the professional background. You couldn't just tell people it was like this or like that. You had to back it all up with the proofs. So on all of these channels are the proofs of what I'm talking about, because I think that's important. Some people don't care about how things work or why things work. They just want the outcome. But I like to know how things work, and more importantly, why they work. So all of these links are ways of finding out how things work and why they work. Basically, in a nutshell, that's it. And then you'll have the avatar going forward, and that will be your access to me, which I think is going to be powerful. So,
yeah, no, definitely. Just one thing I wanted to point out, I hope you don't mind, at the bottom is the Advocate Telegram group. So if you are an advocate, and I know we're getting advocates coming on day in and day out, I share some really great information for you guys. I get a lot of people saying, Sims, I want to spread the word. How can I do this? What are the correct wordings, etc.? All that information is on there as well. So I just wanted to add that in there, but it's a great resource for all our advocates. And now to the handout slides, Ian.
Yeah, there's many handouts. The best place, really, I mean, if you want to get anything, get access to information, is to go to Ecclesia Law, and all the research papers are on there. If you like reading, I sometimes download the papers and I put them into an app on my phone called Speechify, which is quite an interesting app. You can get it free on your phone, and if you copy and paste text from a document into it, it reads it to you like an ebook, like an audio book, I should say. So if you're more interested in, or you learn easier with listening to things, you can do that. So you could, sad as it sounds, you could actually download my research papers into Speechify, and you could listen to them when you're driving the car or walking the dog or whatever it is you do. And that might be an easier way of the information sinking in. And then you've got the avatar as well. So,
well, people do learn in different ways, don't they? So it's visual and stuff like that. So no, that's all great information. And I think, to be honest, Ian, over the, when I speak to lots of members, I think they now more so have got a thirst for knowledge as well. So I think they love all the information. I know you write a lot of papers, and I know you share that with our members, and they just love it. So it's brilliant. And the next slide about webinar invitation rewards.
Yeah, no, this is big. And what I've done in the last week, I think it was middle of last week, I decided to up this to make it far more attractive. So, for example, if you wanted to finance the Great Escape protocols, or like the Envoy, the Asset Fortress, the currency creation, for example, just take those three because they're the flagship three. If you wanted to finance those and you didn't really have the budget to get started now, then I'm giving you a pathway. Use the link that you have access to invite people to any and all of my webinars going forward. And the people that come that you've invited are then basically they're recorded in a digital wallet, and £100 for everyone that you get coming to a webinar of mine going forward. So 10 people coming, 20 people coming is 2,000 that you can set off against the donation cost of the Great Escape protocols, the Envoy asset for any of the protocols. I want to spread the word, as is obvious. We had pretty high number on this webinar. I want 10 times this number on my webinars. And the only way of doing that is to incentivize those that come to invite other people to come. And then there's a financial reward involved with that. And it's, I think it was too low before. It was only £10 for somebody to come, for you to invite someone to a webinar. And it wasn't really catching on in the way I wanted it to catch on. So this way it should catch on, I think, a lot more. And for those people that are on a really tight budget and they can't find the donation to get started, then this is a way for them to get started. You can put the link on social media. We give you the marketing to go with it. You can send it to people that you know and say, hey, you should really have a look at one of these webinars or some of these webinars. And these points aren't per webinar. They're any webinar that your referral comes to. So, over the course of a few weeks, I do one every week. You could quite easily build up a very good sum in your digital wallet to offset against the donation costs. Not that I think that, I'm not saying that everybody can come and do this and use their digital wallet to finance everything, because we still do need cash flows coming in at the moment to keep our organization running so that we can deliver to the thousands of existing envoys that we've got. So it's a balancing. I hope it's well received, this webinar reward scheme.
Well, I've been talking to many advocates this week, and I've had really great positive feedback from them. So I wanted to share that with you. And Q&A. So as we've mentioned now quite a few times, I will be sending out a link to all our attendees today. So this link will, if you have any additional questions and you want to know the answers to that, and remember, Ian and Andy Benson will be doing it this coming Tuesday. So I'll make sure after this webinar, within the next hour, that email will be sent out to you with that link. So it's really important. Any questions you have, submit them, and we make sure that Andy will receive that, and then he can ask those questions to Ian as well. And also feedback. We do value feedback from all our attendees. What we like to do is ensure that the presentation we deliver week in, week out, is the best of the best as such. And really, to improve that we are doing that week in, week out, your feedback is valuable. So please include your feedback there as well.
As we're not doing polls right here, I really want people to indicate whether they're interested in this in the Void Mortgage. That's the avatar and the AI, because we are currently building it, and I want to know how many people on this webinar are interested in using it, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
We've got a lot of priorities. So if there's lots of people who want to use it, I'll bump it up the priority list. Okay.
Perfect. So if you can do that in capital, so we can see it from a visual point of view quickly, because as you said, Ian, you want this information, I would say pronto. So if you put in capitals, what Ian has just mentioned, then we can see it and we can feed that information straight away, but you will get that link. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has attended. I hope you've enjoyed it so much. And as I said, your feedback is valuable, and also what Ian has mentioned. But before we leave, Ian, I know there's quite a few final thoughts you would like to share. I think you've already mentioned one of them, but it's always good to reiterate that again. So any final thoughts before we finish?
Yeah, I get lots and lots of questions about signature credit recruitment. Obviously, I get lots of questions about that. And many of them are the same question over and over and over again. So I put all the frequently asked questions in a document. I put it on Telegram last night. It's already been read by hundreds of people, and it's going to be sent out. So if you've got questions like, how do I know how much credit I've put on the board, Ian? Because I can't remember what bank payments I made, 30 years ago. You just estimate it. If you can remember the bank, that's all we need is the bank and an estimate of each year. If you can't remember exactly how much your mortgage was that you had 20 years ago, just estimate it. Because that's one of the most frequent questions I get is, how do I remember what these things are, right? How much I spent in a year, how much the mortgage was. I get it. I can't remember what I was doing 40 years ago. No way can I remember. But I do remember the bank account I had. And I can pretty much estimate how much I put through it in a year. I can estimate it pretty accurately, I think. So that's all you need to do is work out how much did you spend out of your bank accounts? Which bank was it? What year was it? Roughly, write it down. Get a bit of paper out, write it down, or spreadsheet, or whatever you want to do, and add it up. You'd be quite surprised how much it is, how many mortgages you might have had, how many loans, credit cards you've had. Write them down, add them all up. That's what you've left on the table, as they say.
Definitely. Something else I wanted to add, Ian, because we do get a lot of questions about timeframes. So I know that you did an interview with Andy, and I've got that link, so I will include that link as well.
I've done an interview on timeframes of signature credit. If you want to avoid the mortgage, then the adverse claim, you're issuing an adverse claim on the indentured trustee. Before you do that, you've got to get your mortgage. You've got to file against the mortgage the 1099 OID to correct the holder in due course at the grantor trust level. That can happen within a month. The grantor trust can be set up. Tax filings can be done. The creditor position can be corrected within a month. Then you do the adverse claim, which is just a single document that goes out. Your avatar and your AI will be able to produce that precisely against the mortgage that you've got. And then filing in the court case, there's 5 documents that get filed in New York. You can upload them all electronically. The avatar tells you, is going to give you a briefing on exactly how to do everything and produce all the documents for you. So you could actually have proof that your mortgage is void within 2 to 3 months, I'd say, from starting.
Brilliant.
And then you take it back to your local area, wherever you are, and you get the mortgage provider to remove the charge. And if they don't want to, then you take them to court, and the avatar and the AI will tell you how to do all that as well.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, Ian, thank you so much for taking the time out today, delivering the presentation. I hope this afternoon you have better weather compared to what was happening just before or during the presentation.
Well, the rain stopped. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good.
It was going to flood the floor out. It was like a monsoon came down.
Oh my God.
I had sliding doors on my left, and it was like coming through the doors.
I bet the cats weren't amused, that's for sure, anyway.
They were smart enough to have come in, so they're all inside. So yeah, they're smart enough to get out of that. So.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And I can see there's heart shapes and thumbs up, because I know we've got our members on Facebook who have been watching. So thank you for your feedback there. It's great to see that you've enjoyed it. So those on Facebook, our YouTube channels and StreamYard, I like to say thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful Saturday and the rest of the weekend. So I'm just ending that right now. So take care.